Captain Jake Morrison stood in the command center of the UES Defiance and watched the stars shift around them as they moved through space at impossible speeds. The ship was humanity's most advanced stealth frigate, and right now it was carrying them toward what many considered the most dangerous place in the galaxy. Ahead of them lay the Iron Citadel, a massive fortress that belonged to the Zirathi Empire and had never been successfully attacked in over 1,000 years. Jake touched the control panel, and the main screen showed their destination. The fortress looked like a metal moon covered in weapons and defense systems. It was bigger than Earth's actual moon and contained millions of Zirathi warriors, along with their most deadly weapon. The reality shredder was something that could destroy entire star systems by unmaking them from existence itself. The Zirathi had used it only twice in their long history, and both times they had wiped out civilizations that dared to challenge their rule. The communication system buzzed, and Admiral Lisa Kane's face appeared on the screen. She looked tired and worried, which was not like her at all. Lisa had been fighting aliens for 20 years, and Jake had never seen her show fear before. That alone told him how serious this mission really was. "Jake, you know why you're here, but I need to say it one more time for the record," Lisa said from her position back at Earth Command. "The Zirathi are planning to use the reality shredder against our home system. Our intelligence says they will fire it in 72 hours unless we can stop them. Your team is our only hope because conventional attacks have failed against that fortress for centuries." Jake nodded and looked around at his crew. Lieutenant Commander Alex Rodriguez was checking his demolition equipment for the 10th time today. The man was nervous, but Jake trusted him completely because Alex had blown up more alien installations than anyone else in the fleet. Chief Petty Officer Kate Sullivan sat at her computer station running final checks on her hacking programs. She was the best technology specialist humanity had and could break into almost any alien system if given enough time. Sergeant Ben Parker stood near the engineering console, studying the fortress blueprints they had managed to steal. Ben was a combat engineer who could build or destroy almost anything, and his mind worked in ways that confused even other humans. Dia Amy Foster was reviewing her notes about Zirathi biology and culture. She was both a xenobiologist and an intelligence analyst, which made her invaluable for understanding how their enemies thought and acted. "The plan is simple," Jake told his team as Lisa's transmission ended. "We use the phase cloak to get close to the fortress without being detected. Alex plants charges on their outer defenses while Kate hacks into their computer systems. Ben will guide us through their internal structure, and Amy will help us understand what we're seeing once we get inside. We disable the reality shredder and download their military data, then get out before they know what hit them." Rodriguez laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Simple," he says. "We're about to break into a fortress that has defeated every attack for a millennium and steal the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy." "Sure, Captain. Sounds simple to me." Kate looked up from her computer. "The good news is that Zirathi technology follows very predictable patterns. They think in straight lines and use rigid programming structures. My chaos algorithms should be able to confuse their systems long enough for us to get inside." "What exactly are chaos algorithms?" Ben asked while still studying the fortress plans. "Think of them as computer viruses that don't follow any logical pattern," Kate explained. "Zirathi minds are very ordered and mathematical. They expect attacks to follow certain rules. My programs break all those rules at once, which overloads their processing systems." Amy looked up from her research. "That matches what we know about Zirathi psychology. They are a warrior culture that values honor, hierarchy, and following proper procedures. They have ruled the galaxy for so long that they cannot imagine anyone being bold enough to attack their most important fortress. Their arrogance is our biggest advantage." Jake walked over to the viewing window and stared out at the fortress, growing larger ahead of them. The iron citadel was covered in weapon batteries and defensive shields that could destroy entire fleets. Patrol ships moved around it in perfect formation, like metal insects protecting their hive. Everything about it screamed power and invincibility. 50 years ago, we were still stuck on one planet, Jake said quietly. We had just invented faster than light travel, and most aliens thought we were too primitive to matter. Now we're about to assault the strongest fortress in known space, because somebody has to stop them from destroying Earth. That's what makes us dangerous, Amy replied. Other species plan for centuries before making major moves. We humans see a problem and attack it immediately. The Zirathi expect enemies to follow diplomatic protocols and give formal challenges. They don't expect anyone to just show up and start breaking things. The phase cloak engaged and the stars around them shimmered as the Defiance became invisible to normal sensors. Jake felt the familiar tingling sensation as the experimental technology wrapped around their ship. Phase cloaking was still new and dangerous, but it was there. Only chance of getting close to the fortress without being detected. Cloak is stable, Kate reported. We're invisible to their sensors, but we only have 6 hours before the phase field collapses. After that, we'll be sitting ducks in the middle of their defensive grid. Then we better work fast, Jake said. Alex, are your charges ready? Rodriguez patted the pack of micro-explosives attached to his suit. These babies will punch through their hull like paper. The Zirathi use crystalline armor that's incredibly strong but brittle. Human explosives create shock waves that shatter. And instead of just burning through like energy weapons, Ben pointed at the fortress blueprints. According to these stolen plans, their internal layout follows mathematical principles based on their culture. Everything is organized in hierarchical levels, with the most important systems at the center. The reality shredder should be in the core, surrounded by multiple defensive layers. What about guards? Jake asked. Thousands of them, Amy answered. Zirathi warriors are 8 feet tall, covered in natural crystal armor, and carry plasma weapons that can melt through tank armor. They're also incredibly disciplined and will fight to the death rather than retreat. However, they follow rigid tactical doctrines that haven't changed in centuries. Kate smiled at her computer screen, which means they won't know how to handle human-style chaos tactics. We fight dirty, break rules, and improvise constantly. Their programming can't adapt fast enough to deal with that. The fortress continued growing larger as they approached. Jake could see the massive weapon ports and shield generators that protected it. Somewhere inside that metal mountain was the reality shredder, along with enough firepower to destroy 100 worlds. The mission seemed impossible, but that had never stopped humans before. Remember, Jake told his crew, we're not just fighting for Earth. Every free species in the galaxy is counting on us to stop this weapon. The Zirathi have kept everyone else under their rule for too long. It's time somebody showed them that their empire isn't as invincible as they think. Contact in 30 minutes, Kate announced. All systems are ready and the phase cloak is holding steady. Jake looked at each of his crew members and saw determination mixed with fear in their faces. They all knew this was probably a one-way mission, but nobody was backing down. That was the thing about humans that other aliens never understood. When faced with impossible odds, humans didn't calculate their chances of survival. They just attacked anyway and figured out how to win later. The Iron Citadel filled their entire view now, its metal surface covered in defensive weapons and patrol ships. Somewhere inside that fortress were the controls to humanity's most dangerous enemy. In a few hours, they would either save their homeworld or die trying. Either way, the Zirathi were about to learn why the galaxy had started calling humans the most dangerous species alive. Beginning final approach, Kate reported as the Defiance moved toward the fortress, like a ghost in the darkness. The Defiance drifted silently toward the Iron Citadel's outer hull, while its phase cloak kept them invisible to the fortress sensors. Jake Morrison watched as Alex Rodriguez suited up for the most dangerous part of their infiltration, the demolitions. Expert would have to leave the safety of their ship and work directly on the Zirathi fortress while floating in open space. Remember, Alex, you only have 20 minutes before their patrol ships complete their next sweep, Jake said through the communication system. Plant the charges on the auxiliary power nodes and get back here fast. Rodriguez sealed his helmet and checked his equipment one final time. The micro-explosives were designed specifically for Zirathi crystalline armor and would create precise breaches without alerting the main security systems. At least that was the theory, since nobody had ever actually tested them on a real Zirathi fortress before. Don't worry, Captain. I'll be back before you know it, Alex said as he moved toward the airlock. These charges are going to punch through their hull like a hot knife through butter. The airlock cycled, and Rodriguez jetted out into space using his suit thrusters. Jake watched on the external cameras as the tiny figure moved across the vast metal surface of the fortress. The Iron Citadel stretched in all directions like an artificial world covered in weapon batteries and defensive systems. It was hard to believe that such a massive structure could be built by any civilization. Kate Sullivan worked frantically at her computer station as she tried to penetrate the Zirathi network systems. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she launched wave after wave of chaos algorithms into their defenses. The programs were designed to think in completely random patterns that would confuse the logical Zirathi computer minds. I'm getting through their outer firewalls, Kate reported. Their security is incredibly strong, but it's also very predictable. They use the same mathematical patterns for everything, which makes them vulnerable to random attacks. Ben Parker studied the fortress blueprints while monitoring their progress. As a combat engineer, he could see weaknesses in the Zirathi design that others might miss. The fortress was incredibly powerful, but it was also built according to rigid cultural rules that created blind spots. Their ventilation systems follow a geometric pattern based on their religious beliefs, Ben said while pointing at the screen. They never expected anyone to use those passages for infiltration, because doing so would be considered blasphemous by Zirathi standards. Dr. Amy Foster watched the external cameras and observed the Zirathi patrol ships moving in perfect formation around the fortress. The alien vessels were beautiful in their own way, with crystalline hulls that sparkled in the starlight. However, their flight patterns were completely predictable, which was both a strength and a weakness. The patrol routes haven't changed in over 200 years according to our intelligence, Amy said. The Zirathi value tradition over tactical flexibility. They would rather follow ancient procedures than adapt to new threats. Rodriguez reached the first power node and began placing his charges. The micro-explosives were almost invisible against the dark metal of the fortress hull. Each one was programmed to detonate at precisely the right moment to create maximum damage while avoiding detection by security sensors. First charge is set, Alex reported through his suit radio. Moving to the second target now. Kate suddenly sat up straight at her computer as new information flowed across her screen. Jake, I'm seeing something strange in their internal communications. There are references to human prisoners being held somewhere in the fortress. Jake felt his blood run cold. Prisoners? What kind of prisoners? The translation is a bit unclear, but it mentions experimental subjects and behavioral analysis. Kate continued. It looks like they've been studying captured humans to understand our tactical thinking. Amy leaned over Kate's shoulder to read the alien text. As a xenobiologist, she could interpret Zirathi writing better than most humans. What she saw made her face go pale with concern. This is worse than we thought, Amy said quietly. They're not just holding prisoners. They're conducting experiments to figure out why humans are so unpredictable in combat. The Zirathi have started to see us as a real threat to their empire. Ben looked up from his engineering analysis. If they have human prisoners, then we have to rescue them. We can't leave our people in Zirathi hands. Jake nodded, but his mind was racing with the implications. Their mission was already incredibly dangerous, and now they had an additional objective that could compromise everything. However, he knew Ben was right, because no human would ever abandon their own people to alien captors. We'll adapt the plan, Jake decided. After we breach the hull, we'll split into 2 teams. One team goes after the reality shredder, while the other locates and rescues the prisoners. Rodriguez finished placing the second charge and was moving toward the third target, when his voice crackled over the radio with excitement. Captain, you need to see this. There's some kind of docking bay here that isn't on our stolen blueprints. It looks like it's been recently constructed. Kate quickly hacked into the fortress construction records, and what she found made everyone in the command center go silent. The new docking bay was built specifically to hold human spacecraft. They've been planning to capture more of our ships. How many prisoners are we talking about? Jake asked. Amy continued translating the Zirathi communications while Kate fed her more intercepted messages. The picture that emerged was both encouraging and terrifying at the same time. At least 30 humans from what I can determine, Amy reported. They mentioned Captain Steve Mitchell and his crew from the UES Ranger. That ship was reported lost 6 months ago during a scouting mission. Jake remembered Steve Mitchell as a good officer and a brave captain who would never give up without a fight. If Mitchell was alive, then he had probably been planning an escape attempt for months. That could work in their favor if they could coordinate their efforts properly. Rodriguez placed the final charge and began making his way back to the Defiance. All explosives are in position and ready to detonate on your command captain. These should create nice quiet holes in their hull without triggering any alarms. Kate's chaos algorithms finally broke through the main security barriers, and she gained access to the fortress internal systems. What she found there was both fascinating and disturbing. The Zirathi had been studying human prisoners by forcing them to solve tactical problems and recording their thought processes. They're trying to understand how we think, Kate said while scrolling through research files. The Zirathi are convinced that human unpredictability gives us an unfair advantage in combat. They want to either eliminate that advantage or copy it for themselves. Can you locate where the prisoners are being held? Jake asked. Working on it now, Kate replied as her fingers flew across the keyboard. Their detention systems are on a separate network, but I think I can trace the communication pathways. Rodriguez reached the airlock and cycled back into the ship just as Kate found what they were looking for. The detention center was located in the middle levels of the fortress, heavily guarded but not as well protected as the reality shredder. Chamber, I've got their location, Kate announced. The prisoners are being held in section Gamma 7, which is about halfway between our entry point and the main weapon systems. Ben studied the fortress layout and quickly calculated the best route to reach both objectives. We can use the maintenance tunnels to reach the detention center first. If we free the prisoners, they can help us fight our way to the reality shredder. Amy nodded in agreement. Captain Mitchell and his crew are experienced combat veterans. Having them on our side would significantly improve our chances of success. Jake made his decision quickly because time was running out. We go in as planned, but we rescue the prisoners first. Alex, are you ready to blow those charges? Rodriguez grinned and held up the detonator. Just say the word, Captain, and we'll have our way inside. Do it. The micro-explosives detonated in perfect sequence, creating 3 small breaches in the fortress hull. The charges were designed to look like random system failures rather than deliberate attacks. Emergency systems sealed the holes automatically, while atmosphere rushed out into space for just a few seconds. "Breaches are clean and sealed," Kate reported. "Their automated systems think it was equipment malfunction. We have maybe 30 minutes before maintenance crews investigate." The Defiance moved through one of the holes and into the fortress interior. They were now inside the most heavily defended structure in the galaxy, with only their wits and weapons to protect them. Ahead lay the reality shredder, 30 human prisoners, and thousands of Zirathi warriors who would kill them without hesitation. "Welcome to the Iron Citadel," Jake said as they prepared to leave their ship. "Let's go save some humans and stop a galactic war." Jake Morrison led his team through the narrow maintenance corridors of the Iron Citadel, while emergency lights flashed red all around them. The fortress was massive beyond imagination, and every surface was covered in alien writing that glowed with an eerie blue light. Kate Sullivan had her portable computer connected to the fortress systems and was using it to guide them toward the detention center where the human prisoners were being held. "Turn left here," Kate whispered as she checked her readings. "The prisoner cells are 3 levels down and about half a kilometer ahead. I'm not detecting any guard patrols in this section, but that could change fast." Alex Rodriguez carried his plasma rifle ready for action, while Ben Parker checked their route against the stolen blueprints. The maintenance tunnels were designed for Zirathi workers, who were much taller than humans, so the team had to move carefully too. Avoid making noise on the metal grating beneath their feet. Dr. Amy Foster was studying her scanner readings and frowning at what she was seeing. "The biosignatures ahead are definitely human, but there are also some readings I don't recognize. The Zirathi might be conducting medical experiments on the prisoners." "What kind of experiments?" Jake asked quietly as they moved through another corridor. "I can't tell from here, but the energy patterns suggest some kind of neural monitoring." Amy replied, "They might be scanning the prisoner's brain activity to understand human thought processes." The team reached a junction where multiple corridors met, and Kate held up her hand to signal a stop. Her computer was picking up movement ahead, and the readings suggested Zirathi guards were patrolling the area around the detention center. 2 guards moving in a standard patrol pattern," Kate reported in a whisper. "They're following the same route every 12 minutes, which means we have a small window to get past them." Ben studied the corridor layout and pointed to a ventilation shaft above them. "We can use that air duct to bypass the guards completely. It leads directly to the detention level." Jake nodded, and Alex boosted Ben up into the ventilation system. The combat engineer disappeared into the darkness, and a few seconds later, his voice came through their radio communicators. "The shaft is clear and leads exactly where we need to go," Ben reported. "Come on up, but move quietly, because sound carries in these metal ducts." One by one, the team climbed into the ventilation system and crawled through the narrow space toward their destination. The air inside the fortress was thick and humid, with a strange metallic smell that made breathing difficult. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows on the walls around them as they moved forward. Kate suddenly grabbed Jake's arm and pointed at her scanner. "Motion sensors ahead are detecting something big. Multiple life forms moving in formation." Through a ventilation grate, they could see into a large chamber where dozens of Zirathi warriors were conducting some kind of military exercise. The aliens were 8 feet tall, with crystalline armor that sparkled under the artificial lights. Their plasma weapons glowed with contained energy that could melt through steel. "Training session," Amy whispered as she observed the Zirathi movements. "They're practicing assault tactics against an enemy that fights like humans. Look at how they're adapting their formations." Jake watched in fascination as the Zirathi warriors broke from their traditional rigid formations and began using more flexible tactics. They were clearly learning from their encounters with human forces and adapting their ancient military doctrines accordingly. They're getting smarter, Ben observed. That's not good for us. The team continued through the ventilation system until they reached the detention level. Through another grate, they could see a corridor lined with energy barriers that contained prison cells. Zirithi guards stood at regular intervals, while scientists moved between the cells carrying scanning equipment. There, Amy pointed to one of the cells. That's definitely Captain Steve Mitchell. Jake could see a human figure sitting in one of the energy-contained cells. The man looked tired and beaten, but his posture suggested he was still ready to fight. Several other cells contained additional human prisoners who appeared to be in similar condition. Kate worked on her computer to find a way to disable the cell barriers without triggering alarms. Their security system is incredibly sophisticated, but it follows predictable patterns. If I can introduce a cascade failure, it should look like a system malfunction rather than sabotage. How long do you need? Jake asked. Give me 5 minutes to upload the right virus, Kate replied while her fingers flew across the keyboard. Alex checked his weapon and prepared for combat. Once those barriers go down, we're going to have about 30 seconds before every guard. In this section comes running. We need to be ready for a fight. Ben studied the prison layout and identified the best escape route. The emergency stairwell leads directly to the main fortress levels. From there, we can reach the reality shredder chamber or fight our way back to our ship. Amy was monitoring the Zirithi scientists, and what she saw made her angry. They're using neural scanners on the prisoners to map human brain activity. They're trying to understand how we think so they can predict our tactics. Not for much longer, Jake said grimly. Kate finished uploading her virus and the prison cell barriers began flickering. Here we go. Barriers will fail in 10 seconds. Jake spoke into his communicator on a frequency he hoped the prisoners might be monitoring. Captain Mitchell, this is Captain Morrison of the UES Defiance. We're here to get you out. Be ready to move when those barriers drop. The energy barriers suddenly vanished, and alarms began blaring throughout the detention center. Zirithi guards turned toward the cells in confusion, as the human prisoners immediately began fighting back. Captain Mitchell grabbed a plasma weapon from the nearest guard and began coordinating his people like the experienced officer he was. Morrison. Mitchell shouted over the noise. We've been planning this for months. My people know exactly what to do. The rescued humans moved with military precision as they overwhelmed their guards and seized weapons. Jake was impressed by how quickly they organized themselves, despite months of captivity. It was exactly the kind of adaptability that made humans so dangerous to their enemies. We need to move fast, Jake told Mitchell as they fought their way out of the detention center. The entire fortress is going to be looking for us in about 5 minutes. My people discovered something important while we were prisoners here, Mitchell replied while firing at pursuing guards. The reality shredder isn't just a weapon. It's powered by consciousness itself. They're using the minds of captured beings as a power source. Amy looked shocked. That's impossible. No technology could harness consciousness like that. The Zirithi have been doing it for centuries, Mitchell explained as they reached the stairwell. Every species they've conquered has contributed unwilling minds to power their ultimate weapon. That's why it's so devastating. Kate was monitoring fortress communications on her portable computer. They know we're here now. Security alerts are going out to every level, and they're mobilizing their entire garrison. Ben led the group up the emergency stairwell while calculating their best route to the reality shredder chamber. If the weapon is powered by consciousness, then destroying it might require a different approach than we originally planned. The control chamber is heavily shielded, but there's a weakness, Mitchell continued. The consciousness matrix that powers the weapon can be overloaded if you introduce enough chaotic thought patterns. Human minds are perfect for this because we think in ways that Zirathi technology can't process. Jake understood immediately. You're talking about a suicide mission. Someone would have to interface directly with the weapon to overload it. Maybe, Mitchell admitted, but it's the only way to stop them from using it against Earth. The group reached the main fortress level and found themselves in a massive corridor lined with weapon batteries and defensive systems. Red emergency. Lights flashed everywhere, while the sound of marching feet echoed from multiple directions. The Zirathi were mobilizing their entire military force to hunt down the escaped prisoners. Which way to the reality shredder? Jake asked. Mitchell pointed down the corridor toward the fortress center. 5 kilometers that way, through the most heavily defended section of the entire structure. The Zirathi will throw everything they have at us to protect that weapon. Then we better get moving, Alex said while checking his ammunition. Because ready or not, here they come. Hundreds of Zirathi warriors appeared at both ends of the corridor and began advancing toward the human group. Their plasma weapons charged with deadly energy, while their crystalline armor sparkled in the emergency lighting. The aliens moved with perfect military precision as they prepared to eliminate the intruders who had dared to violate their sacred. Fortress. Jake looked at his expanded team of human fighters and felt a surge of pride. They were outnumbered 1,000 to 1 and trapped in the heart of enemy territory, but nobody was backing down. This was what made humans special in a galaxy full of ancient civilizations. When faced with impossible odds, they didn't calculate their chances of survival. They just fought harder. Jake Morrison dove behind a metal support beam as plasma bolts sizzled through the air where he had been standing just seconds before. The corridor erupted into chaos as hundreds of Zirathi warriors advanced from both directions, while the combined human forces fought desperately for their lives. The aliens moved in perfect formation, with their crystalline armor reflecting the red emergency lights like moving mirrors. We can't fight them all, Alex Rodriguez shouted over the sound of weapons fire. There are too many of them, and more, coming every second. Captain Steve Mitchell rolled behind cover next to Jake and began coordinating the defense with military precision. My people know this fortress better than you might think. We've been mapping it for months while planning our escape. There's another route to the reality shredder that bypasses most of their defenses. Where? Jake asked while returning fire at the advancing Zirathi. Maintenance shaft 7 levels up leads directly to the weapon chamber, Mitchell replied. The only problem is getting there alive. Kate Sullivan was working frantically on her portable computer while plasma bolts exploded around her position. I'm uploading chaos viruses into every system I can reach. Their communications are starting to break down, and some of their automated defenses are turning against each other. Ben Parker spotted a service elevator at the far end of the corridor and pointed it out to the others. If we can reach that elevator, we might be able to get to the upper levels. But we'll have to fight through at least 50 Zirathi to get there. Dr. Amy Foster was treating wounded prisoners while keeping an eye on her scanner readings. The fortress. Computer systems are reacting badly to Kate's viruses. Zirathi programming can't handle random inputs, and it's causing cascade failures throughout their network. One of Mitchell's crew members, a sergeant named Danny Clark, crawled over to their position while clutching a captured Zirathi plasma rifle. Captain, I've been listening to their communications. They're mobilizing their elite guard units and sealing all exits. They want to trap us here and study how we fight. Then we'll have to give them a lesson they won't forget, Jake said grimly. Mitchell stood up and fired a burst of plasma energy at the nearest Zirathi warriors. My people will create a diversion while your team makes for the elevator. We've been planning something like this for months, and we know exactly how to cause maximum chaos. What kind of diversion? Alex asked. The kind that brings down half the fortress, Mitchell replied with a dangerous grin. Jake realized what Mitchell was planning and felt his stomach drop. You're going to overload their power systems. Danny here used to be an engineer before. He joined the military, Mitchell explained. He's been studying their power grid for weeks. If we can reach the main reactor, we can cause a feedback loop that will disable most of their defensive systems. Ben looked shocked. That's incredibly dangerous. If you make a mistake, you could destroy the entire fortress with us inside it. Better than letting them use the reality shredder against Earth, Mitchell said firmly. Kate looked up from her computer with excitement in her eyes. Wait, I think I found something better. The chaos viruses are spreading through their bio-neural networks, faster than they can contain them. If I can reach a main computer terminal, I might be able to crash their entire system without blowing anything up. Amy pointed her scanner toward the elevator. The biosignatures ahead show at least 60 Zirathi warriors between us and that elevator. Even with surprise on our side, we'll take heavy casualties trying to fight through them. Not if we use human tactics, Jake said as an idea formed in his mind. Zirathi expect enemies to attack in organized formations, following logical strategies. What if we do the exact opposite? Mitchell understood immediately. Chaos assault. We split into random groups and attack from multiple directions at once, with no coordinated plan. Their tactical computers won't be able to predict our movements. Exactly, Jake confirmed. Kate keeps uploading viruses to confuse their systems, while we create maximum confusion with completely unpredictable attacks. Alex grinned and checked his weapons. I love it when a plan has no plan at all. The human forces split into 6 small groups and began their chaotic assault on the Zirathi. Positions. Each group moved independently without coordination or communication, which made their actions completely unpredictable. Some groups attacked head-on, while others flanked from the sides, and one group even climbed along the ceiling using maintenance equipment. The Zirathi warriors found themselves unable to respond effectively because their tactical training had never prepared them for enemies who fought without any logical strategy. Their formation began to break down as they tried to respond to attacks coming from every direction at once. Kate reached a computer terminal and began uploading her most powerful chaos algorithms directly into the fortress main system. I'm in their central network now. These viruses should spread to every computer in the fortress within minutes. Ben led his group in a direct assault on the elevator, while Jake and Alex provided covering fire from elevated positions. The combat engineer used his knowledge of Zirathi technology to disable their defensive systems by attacking them in ways their designers had never anticipated. Their armor is strongest against energy weapons, but vulnerable to kinetic impacts. Ben shouted while throwing improvised explosives made from maintenance equipment. Human weapons work better against them than their own technology. Mitchell and his people fought with the desperate fury of prisoners who had finally tasted freedom. They used captured Zirathi weapons with deadly efficiency while employing tactics that violated every rule of conventional warfare. The aliens found themselves outfought by enemies they had considered primitive. Just hours earlier, Amy reached the elevator and began working on its control systems. The lift is locked down, but I think I can override it using medical access codes. Zirathi systems always include emergency protocols for treating wounded warriors. The chaos assault worked perfectly as the Zirathi formation collapsed under the unpredictable human attacks. Several alien warriors actually began firing at each other because Kate's viruses had corrupted their identification systems, and they could no longer tell friend from enemy. Elevator is working, Amy announced, but it will only hold about half of us at one time. Jake made a quick decision. Mitchell, take your people and secure the reactor level. If we fail to stop the reality shredder, then you'll need to overload the power systems to prevent them from firing it. What about you? Mitchell asked. My team goes after the weapon directly, Jake replied. Between Kate's viruses and your power overload, we should be able to disable it permanently. The two groups separated, with Mitchell leading his people toward the fortress power center while Jake's team rode the elevator toward the upper levels where the reality shredder waited. The elevator moved smoothly upward through the massive structure, while emergency alarms continued blaring throughout the fortress. Kate monitored the progress of her virus attack on her portable computer. The chaos algorithms are spreading faster than the Zerathi can contain them. Their entire computer network is starting to break down as their systems try to process random data patterns. How much damage are we talking about? Ben asked. Massive, Kate replied with satisfaction. Zerathi technology is incredibly advanced, but it's also completely dependent on logical programming. Human-style randomness is like a poison to their systems. The elevator reached the upper fortress levels and opened to reveal a corridor lined with energy barriers and automated defense systems. However, most of the defensive equipment was sparking and malfunctioning due to the chaos viruses that had infected the fortress computers. This way to the reality shredder chamber, Amy said while checking her readings. The weapon signatures are incredibly strong now. We're getting close. Alex checked his demolition equipment while they moved through the malfunctioning corridor. If this weapon is really powered by consciousness, then conventional explosives might not work against it. We might need to find another way to destroy it. Jake was thinking about what Mitchell had told them regarding the weapon's power source. If it's powered by the minds of captured beings, then maybe we can overload it by introducing too much chaotic thought. You mean like connecting a human mind directly to the system? Ben asked. It's crazy enough that it might work, Jake admitted. Human consciousness is chaotic enough to crash any computer system. They reached the final corridor leading to the Curie reality shredder chamber and found themselves facing the most heavily defended position in the entire fortress. Dozens of elite Zerathi guards stood ready while energy barriers blocked every possible approach. At the center of it all was a massive door that led to humanity's greatest enemy. This is it, Jake said as they prepared for the final assault. Everything depends on what happens in the next few minutes.